Welcome everyone to another webinar hosted by Productled. Today we have Natalie Marketillo, who will be spearheading our webinar. And so Natalie, handing things off over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Pierce. We can give a few minutes to let people trickle in, but today we'll be talking about product-led content and using it at all forms throughout the marketing funnel.
Yep, and yeah, we're really looking forward to this webinar, and considering we have quite the big hitters in our panel here, I'm sure there's a lot people can learn from joining us. We're also live streaming on YouTube at the official Productled YouTube channel, so feel free to watch there as well for everyone. You can see the link for it in our social media posts and other whatnot. Okay, we'll officially start in a few minutes, just waiting for other people to come in. So quick question just to warm things up, break the ice here. What are some personal and professional wins that you had over the past week? Let's start off with Jeff.
Hey, how's it going? Happy to talk about some personal and professional wins. Well, personal, was able to head up to New Jersey and visit some friends I haven't seen in a number of years. That's where I'm originally from, so that was good. I don't get much time off, so it was a good deal. And then professionally, just released an internal pricing and packaging research effort with a third-party consultant that led to some meaningful changes to our business. So can't beat that for 1 week, right?
Yeah, for sure. Who are you going to popcorn it to?
What was that, Pierce?
Who are you going to popcorn it over to?
Oh, let's go to Abel.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't think I can match your professional win. I can definitely match your personal win. I think it's a very weird one, but I've moved to Boston 9 months ago, and this weekend it was -5 degrees Celsius, and someone asked me how's the weather, and I said, oh, it's not too bad today, which I consider a personal win. It's great. I'm finally adapting to like the cold. Professionally, I'll cheat a little bit because it's not for the past week, but it's something that we're releasing tomorrow. So tomorrow we should have like our release of a new coupon engine that lets you optimize basically like the coupons that you're serving to users. So quite excited about that one.
Nice. Sure. We currently have like 30 people in. Definitely interested in what everybody else's wins are over the week, but I'm going to hand it off now to Natalie. Feel free to take over.
Yeah, I was going to say my win anyways is hosting this this presentation and just talking about product-led content. So it's a nice transition. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, I'm Natalie. We're going to be talking today about product-led content and how to incorporate it at different points in the funnel. Before we really dive in, just figured everyone could give a quick introduction of themselves. So I'll go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, I'm head of growth here at Navattic, which essentially allows any company to go product-led through interactive product demos. And then Abel, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Abel. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Corrily. What we do is we do price optimization for SaaS companies, so any type of subscription companies. So we work with companies like Skillshare, Linktree, Brilliant, and we figure out the optimal price for them to actually serve in a given country and the optimal discount to give their users. Yeah, it's been like we've been growing very fast and have had tons of learning in terms of product-led marketing, and definitely learning to happy to learn from Jeff and Daniel.
Awesome. I'm Jeff Coyle. I'm the co-founder and chief strategy officer for MarketMuse. And MarketMuse is a content intelligence platform that sets the standard for content quality. So basically, if you're not sure what to write about, how much to write, what things to create, what things to update, MarketMuse can give you insights that deliver predictable ROI. Dan, yo.
Hey everybody, I'm Daniel Weiner, co-founder and CEO of Autobound. The problem that we're solving is with the mass adoption of email automation products, our inboxes are flooded and they've been weaponized to a certain extent. So we built a sales intelligence engine that enables outbound sellers to personalize their emails at scale. So great to meet you all and excited to speak today.
Awesome, thanks everyone. And just before we dive in, wanted to talk about like what product-led content is. It's a topic and phrase that I've heard a few times before, but to give our own definition, we see it as really any content that, you know, weaves in your product into the content, but it's mainly used to solve a problem for the reader or viewer. So it's less like a feature function page to show off all the different features your product has. It more is a piece of content you put out anyways that naturally explains how your product or how the value of your product could help solve their problem. And one of the best examples I keep referencing of this is Ahrefs. Not surprising that an SEO tool has really good content out there, but to dive into what it is, they have blog posts that really are top of funnel. So as we see, this is all about like what is content writing. This is someone who's probably not super familiar with what SEO is or what Ahrefs does. But as we go through the piece, we'll see that they've really like just weaved in their product. So we'll see here they have an example of their keyword research tool. And if we keep going, we'll see other spots that they've shown how to use Ahrefs to solve this problem. But it's not just like a feature dump. It really helps explain if you're looking to use content writing, how you'd use Ahrefs to do it, but you could also use other tools. And one thing I found really interesting about this piece is actually the CTA at the end. So if we go to the very end, you know, usually when we think of content, especially maybe more salesy content, it's pushing you for a free trial or pushing you for a demo. This, since it is such a top of funnel piece, it's really just pushing you to follow one of their writers on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and learn more. Or here we have subscribe for weekly updates. So really showing that it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, free trial or freemium to incorporate your product. Here, they're really just trying to educate the market. And so that's our first example. I'll hand it over for another example.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely talk about something that we've developed. So like one of the core issues, just to kind of like zoom out a little bit of like what we're trying to achieve there. One of the core issues of our product is that we deliver greater ROI, about 43.2% on average of new MR. But this takes some time because we need to first integrate with billing gateways. We need to like experiment for a little bit before we really learn like what prices work, what prices don't work, and we can actually give recommendations. So because of that, we have like some aspects of the time to value is a little bit long. It's like 3-4 months at least. So we're trying as much as possible to really bring this time to value early on and as early on as possible. And this is an example of something that the team at Corrily came up with, which is, okay, everyone these days is actually worried about inflation. Can we actually give them something that, you know, helps them in some way? And it doesn't have to be like a crazy amount of like development. So it's just a very simple calculator that lets you input your company, input actually how much you're selling your products for, and actually test different scenarios of inflation to see actually how it's going to affect your revenue. And so downstairs, actually, like if you go down a little bit, you'll see that we kind of try to also weave in afterwards. We had, of course, like the content, which was sort of like, hey, inflation is out there. It's affecting your business. Like you might not realize how much it's affecting your business, but it has a significant impact. So we're first giving the calculator to show you, okay, you should pay attention to this. And then the second part is really more trying to actually really show, okay, inflation is a thing. Is there anything I can do about it? Like, can I try to adapt the pricing? Can I adjust by country? Can I analyze my price a little bit. And this is kind of what the copy is really trying to do. And then with the call to action afterwards. Some of the learning from this piece, by the way, is that although at first we were a little bit like focused on top of the funnel acquisition, like to spark up those conversations, what we noticed very quickly is that actually that kind of material is really super useful to reignite conversations, or to actually just kind of like serve as material, because like our sales are fairly like high touch. And so kind of like having this that is, even if we don't share it directly, we've noticed that actually clients that we've talked to in the past saw that we posted it and suddenly came back to us and asked us about inflation. And so, so yeah, this is like something that like the team at Corrily did. And yeah, it was quite meaningful in terms of impact on the company.
Yeah, and Jeff, hand it over to you next.
I love these examples. So far because they're varied in the way that they approach product-led content. So some of the things to be thinking about, and what we've already seen with Ahrefs, it was an early stage awareness content item. What is X? But then it was shown. We call this in product-led content the blank way. So this is the Ahrefs way for answering what is X. So think about what's your company's way, and answer it through the product. Great example of that here is information. This is on SimilarWeb, and this is their coronavirus or COVID-19 page. What this is a bit of a Trojan horse, because it's providing you interesting insights that you can't get anywhere else on any other site, but it's showing you don't even realize you're getting the same type of thing you get inside SimilarWeb. But then you're realizing, whoa, if they can do this for COVID-19, imagine what they could do on the topics that I care about. If I'm the CMO of Reebok, maybe they can monitor all the shoe companies. And basically, before you know it, you're booking a demo. So showing the X way or the SimilarWeb way of providing insights on a topic. We do this at MarketMuse all the time because we measure the quality of comprehensiveness of content. So we'll put a content score on one of our own pages and grade our own content. We'll provide an industry analysis. We'll give you a way to assess the quality and comprehensiveness of your own content to basically show you the way that we would use MarketMuse in your common workflow or your common situation. So think about that. How can you exhibit your way? I loved Abel's example. I want to show you the way that I calculate pricing, optimization through the lens of the things that we influence. Here's another example with SimilarWeb. Doesn't just have to be calculators, doesn't have to just be honeypots. It can also be the presentation of data that only you can present. And this is called blue ocean content, basically. Something that only your data can surface, something that inside your team, your subject matter expertise, your product can do what it needs to do to present your product, present your company in the best possible light. All right, Daniel.
Last example, yeah, hand it over to Daniel.
Well said, Jeff. And thanks, Natalie. So yeah, we took an interesting approach to this that my background's a bit less so in marketing and growth, more so in sales, I guess still somewhat growth, but from an outbound perspective. So when I started Autobound a handful of years ago, we had a very heavy focus on knocking on doors rather than kind of opening up hours with content during the formative years of the company. But so back then we were always hesitant to put out too much of our product or messaging before like catching a hook and getting someone interested in the conversation and questions we were asking. But what I found with Autobound, and we're in the sales intelligence, sales productivity space, is it's a very noisy one. And I don't know, Abel and Jeff, you guys had a similar experience, but a lot of folks, a lot of buyers are very, very visual and want to get to like, how does it work, cut to the chase. And we found ourselves losing them pretty often, given the jargon that exists in automation and sales is just a whole language in itself. So we found a lot of value, and Jeff, there's an analogy to what you just shared too in here with helping a a visitor, a site visitor, better understand how to write an insanely good sales email. I think there's still a lot more we could do to make this better, but we saw conversion spike once we started sharing our ideas of how to use data and relevant information to craft a message that's more specific and relevant to the recipient that's receiving it. So Natalie, if you scroll down a little bit farther, you'll see that we opened up the doors to our product and started telling the story of, and it's funny, everybody claims, even the most tech savvy companies we pitch, that like, oh, our emails are so great and personalized. But what we've learned is that personalization like 1.0 to 2.0, we're still at this 1.0 realm where like your first name is updated in an email, or like your company name has a custom field that auto populates. So we started telling this story of like how much other data is relevant out there that you could tie into your message. And the speed at which we could have conversations and educate someone more quickly once they started having their own analogies clicking through our website was really cool to see. We do some other similar stuff with telling that story throughout the onboarding funnel, which I don't think we've really talked about too much yet, but when you're onboarding, you're still selling in a lot of ways. And we found that once we could start incorporating more of the rationale of why this is important and the pain points we solve, not just the features that we're giving you, into here's how to set up our system, using that product-led content that helped us accelerate what kind of was a heavy lifting onboarding product for a while late last year. And we're seeing a lot of success this year from it too.
Awesome. Sorry. Now that we've gone through some examples here, let me go back and have a quick kind of panel discussion. So we really wanted to show those so everyone got exactly like what is, again, product-led content. There are a lot of different ways throughout the funnel you can use it. But more importantly, we want to talk through from our three experts, like how did you create this content? What were the first steps? Maybe some best practices. So I'm going to start, Abel, with you. And our first question is going to be around, just got to get this up again. What are some, like I said, best practices, and really how do you first go about creating this content?
Okay.
So I'm having a lot of slideshow trouble today.
I mean, I can definitely like say what we're doing. I'm definitely not as much of a product-led expert as someone like Jeff, for instance. My background is as a hedge fund manager for some reason. So I can just say basically like some of the things that I've glanced at and kind of like that we've learned, at least for us, from experience, from direct experience. One thing that Daniel mentioned that I think is incredibly relevant, and it's surprising how prevalent it is. It's just bad copies where you have basically people talking to you and you don't understand what they're selling. Like you don't even understand what the product is. There's walls of text, but you don't even have this like very conception, like basic conception of the product. We've definitely learned that one of the biggest thing, especially for us, given that we're in a field where the product doesn't exist, we're not pitching Corrily versus something else. We're pitching Corrily versus nothing. So it's a new product, and really just giving as much content as possible, like being very transparent, having heavy demo, having like a reachable demo on the website that you can go through, having documentation that is like well out there, having kind of like ways to see what the product is and what it does know. We found that it was very powerful because it's scary at first, because your product at first is not going to be great. And so showing something that is just kind of like, I don't know, 10% of what it could be is a little bit scary, because you think, oh, what if they don't realize the other 90% that is out there? But generally, it worked quite well for us, because we have, even if we're trying to actually really get the top of funnel engagement to be like driven by the product, we still have like like a fairly traditional sales cycle after that. So kind of like towards middle of funnel, we actually do have like conversations where we are going to actually talk to our clients and really dive deeper into like the needs and really kind of like dig into it. So we'll have the opportunity to talk about the 90%. Like the product-led aspect, like the content that we found to be like super useful is just things that spark interest in the solution and let you kind of like understand what it does. At least for us, that's what has worked. But I'm definitely curious what Jeff and Daniel think.
I have the luxury of working with hundreds of content teams of all different shapes and sizes. Some of the things that, especially if you're looking at this from a product specific, like a SaaS offering, is to get your whole team aligned around what your aha moments are, who that target audience is. They say in storytelling, the general is in the specific sometimes. So get really, really detailed with who it's for, what it's focused on, and what that return on investment outcome might be, and show it through the offering. Those are all ways that you can get the whole team behind solutions that can tell this story. In my case, I want to, my aha moments, being able to predict the return on investment of content before I publish it. How do you show that? Talk about it. You can go throughout the story of somebody predicting and then getting that outcome. You could also allow somebody to predict an outcome with content and have that experience, either them or in some sort of parallel universe, what that experience might look like. Also, being able to objectively evaluate the quality of content. Okay, well, how can you do that? Let someone objectively evaluate the quality of their content, or show somebody doing that and then having a outsized win. So think about what that story is for you, and now get really specific as far as the personas who you're targeting, the specific use case, an industry that somebody might attach to, and then you can have that success. I know my experience with Daniel in this specific example was seeing an email that his technology created. And I responded to his email and I said, oh my gosh, this is the best example of personalization in an outbound email I've ever seen. And Daniel, you tell him this is a true story. I sent them an email. I said, this is automated. I can tell because I read this stuff all the time. But in his case, it was an example product, but it was so tuned. And I asked him, I said, how'd you get this fourth paragraph to write? I know he did 1, 2, 3. How'd you get the fourth? And that's how we actually got connected. So there's a lot of different things to be thinking about. But the best way to do it is to think, how can I show my value through the offering? And how can I do it in a way that only I can do?
Well said, Jeff. I was just looking for that email so I could find it, but maybe later. But I wasn't even thinking about that example. That's an interesting one. And I think we have a weird luxury, as do you, with being able to sell your product with your product or dog fooding. But to answer this question more directly, and for those listeners, I think like we're definitely more of a nascent company in terms of executing on this really well. But I think one of the best practices we put into play is just putting good content out there and trying to cut back on as many buzzwords as possible and doing it again and again, and not making the time for it. A few of our best performing pieces, I think, tell a pretty similar story as to why we had success in putting the product open on our website. We used to have a landing page, and I need to go back and configure this again, that we have to do a lot of education around when we talk about personalization, like what the hell does that mean? Everyone's saying personalization. When we talk about like insight-driven content, what does that mean? So we opened up a page that just showed, I think it was like 200 different insights that could impact the reason a salesperson messages their company a certain way, or different ways of showing to the person you're cold emailing, like, hey, I did some research on you and here's why I think you should talk to me, like funding rounds or job openings. I was pretty shocked to see how, like, one, it was actually a help article, like drove traffic to our website above any other blog we had written that month. So we kind of double clicked on that and started speaking a lot more specifically to like our buyer persona, which is like the startup VP of sales or chief revenue officer. Again, trying to cut back on the buzzwords and show them with our content, like how we're solving problems for their sellers and how we were once sellers just like them ourselves. But this isn't all to say we didn't stub our toe a few times. And I think the first few pieces of content we did put out were a bit more sporadic and addressed a really wide market. And I don't think those did too much for us necessarily.
Yeah, those are some great.
One question I have, and I guess actually Jeff probably has like some insight on that, but actually, do you think that there's some aspect of experimentation that's required? Because like, it's not just like, I do feel like there's some aspect of like, I can't predict the content that's going to work out well and the content that's not going to turn out well. And that it's a bit of a learning in the company to just figure out what people care about to hear.
You know, there's three ways you can get that inspiration, right? It's from what you've already written. It's from who you want to be, so your aspirational model, and then it's competitive, the landscape. And if you smash all those things together, you can begin to predict how much content you need to create on any particular topic to have a meaningful outcome, and how much work you need to do. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. But yeah, certainly from the standpoint of the content itself, that's why I like my writers being able to be focused on the narrative. Not necessarily the research. I want them focused on the production value, the excitement, not necessarily exactly what it is. One thing I'll note is, and Daniel mentioned this, help desks, champion development. So those are part of the funnel too. Natalie opened up with awareness, consideration, purchase, but post-purchase troubleshooting. Don't let them have that discussion somewhere else. They should be having that discussion on your site through your product. Champion development, if you're selling to a buying team, right? You've got end users as well as buyers. Well, what is the end user? Maybe they don't have the purchase authority. What content can they share with their boss who's going to be making this purchase decision? You know, be thinking about those two ways that product can be circulated. Those are called circulators, right? But I thought it was a great example with what Daniel said.
I can add a bit to that as well. We give a heck of a lot of demos, my co-founder and I, and whenever we have a good call that we would like to share with each other or mark for like later review, we'll stamp that inside of Salesforce, and we'll try to drill down into what we said or what conversation we were having where the aha moment happened or the light bulb went on. And doing that enough, you start to get a pretty good sense of why people like freaking love what you're doing. And then taking a step back and trying to tell a story around that's been really effective for us. So just like, and we have like a whole Slack channel of this now, but when we do something right, saving it for later and then linking that back to how we're telling our story to the public later on.
It's a great follow-up question. And I think just main takeaways from this whole conversation, it's one, like that aha moment is so important. You know, do your research, listening to your demos, experiment, as you mentioned, talk to customers to see what are those aha moments. And then number two is really, Jeff mentioned this a few times, but if you have that blue ocean content, like if you have data that's just specific to you, that really stands out with the product-led content. And now that we've talked about best practices, I wanted to go over like, how can you actually create these, right? Like steps from this idea that you have to making it. And specifically want to dive into AI because there have been all these startups. I know a few from marketing around creating copy using AI, and I wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on that. So Jeff, I'll start with you to kick it off.
Being one of the companies that's built a natural language generation platform, one thing is you're putting your best foot forward for your company. If it isn't as good as it needs to be, the content. So if you're going to use any sort of generation, treat them like an outsourced person that you've never worked with. So it's inspiration, it's ways to get to. Would you really hire somebody for $49 off of a message board and then post it on your website without looking at it? Why would you do that with a generated content item? It doesn't make any sense. But it's going to keep getting better and better. Make sure those things are going to represent your business well. And for things that are extremely high quality, high value requirement, Make sure that it's what your subject matter expertise is woven in. Outsourcing in-house, I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in content briefs as a single source of truth. So making sure that the person who's creating the copy, everybody who's involved is checking the boxes, validating the content brief that then is used to build the campaign or the vehicle or the content item. That creates the least amount of subjectivity possible, sets the guardrails up, and then you don't have your writers doing keyword research. You don't have your editors giving subjective perspectives, and you don't have your CEO hopping in and going, I don't like this, right? Because you all validated it before the writing began.
How do you go about releasing content? Do you have any tips and tricks for that? Sorry to throw an out of the blue question at you, but
no, I love out of the blue questions. Releasing it depends, right? As in SEO, most things depend. But I mean, basically, you want to publish and promote. You want to have a promotion process, minimum promotion process, and then I like to say for startups, you don't have the luxury of writing net new everything. So have a repurposing strategy, repackaging in different formats. For different learners, focus potentially on different industries, multiple landing pages. If you're building one big ebook or expensive document, how can you capture many different people with that one payoff? And so taking all those things into consideration can have you get you the best outcome. You can put in $1, get many, many more dollars back with a strong repurposing strategy. Like this webinar, it needs to be repurposed into a transcript. That transcript needs to be annotated. It needs to be broken down into pieces, built out into many landing pages. And then we turn this one unit artifact that we spend this much time doing into 100 different ways for product-led to generate leads and members of their site. You should be thinking about that way with everything you publish.
Are there any good areas to learn more about that, like frameworks to leverage or steal from? Because we, as an example, like our best performing piece of content we've ever had, Navattic's been fantastic, but was us resharing a partner of ours post on our partnership outreach and Autobound on LinkedIn. We put some ad dollars behind it, and it's like by far given us the most inbound leads we've had from anything else. But it was just like Daniel was like, hey, I'll throw my Brex card on, it's $200 and see what happens. And I'd like to stop guessing more. So getting good at writing content is one thing, and I think that's easy to wrap heads around to a certain extent at least. But I'm definitely curious to learn more on that. And anybody else who's listening as well, feel free to shoot me a note if you have any suggestions there.
I would recommend. There's a number of really, really strong promotional software solutions that practice product-led content, bringing it all back, Natalie. Yeah, check out content promotion. There's a lot of great examples. CoSchedule is a great resource for this. Ben Saylor there used to publish a lot of stuff that touches on specific examples. A lot of automated social media promotional software products have really great show them that you know them content. So I would check those out for repurposing. And Sujan Patel from Mailshake, he's got some great materials specifically on repurposing. And I've got some pretty great materials on repurposing on the MarketMuse blog. So go check that out.
Cool, I'll check it out.
As far as tools, I'd also say there are a few good ones, like we use Milk Video, but also Rev.com that are AI that can transcribe webinars, videos, all that. So then you don't need to go through the work of creating a whole blog post of reading it. You can just use their transcribing and create additional content from that. I'm also a big believer in, like, I created a framework once. If a piece is 6 months old, let's evaluate it, see if we need to refresh it for Google, see if there are any channels that also make sense, and created our internal template for when we should repurpose content, when we should maybe, kill a topic and try something new, and then when we can expand it. And I do think that delay period is pretty important, because at least with Google, you don't know if something's going to be successful when you first release it. If you're lucky and get like a blue ocean topic and rank to the top right away, that's great. But sometimes you need that time to say, like, okay, am I ranking well? If not, do I need to update it, or is this not a good topic? I think enough people don't necessarily go back to old topic to see like, did this actually work? We often publish a blog and then just kind of leave it there.
Yeah, updating content's the quickest path to wins. One of the values of our product is you can show you which content items need to be updated and prioritize that work. So what you just said is right. Usually the fastest quick wins for your business are updating content. So how do you figure out which
shout out
items?
on that one, Jeff? We just used MarketMuse for that. Like my first time digging in, it was pretty cool to see. We've got some older content that we definitely need to repurpose. And then, yeah, my 2 cents, we've done a bit of outsourced testing to see how good of content we could produce, and ultimately like us as a founding team buckling down and just trying to tell our story more effectively online, as opposed to asking others to do it for us, wasn't a much better decision.
We found the same actually for outsourcing. It hasn't been super successful. We've actually started to work with an outsourced writer who's basically just a writer. So basically what we do is we essentially feed him research, like talking points or deal with the structure of the blog and turning that into something that's very enjoyable to read. We found it to be successful, but we haven't found sort of like, hey, here's a brief. Can you please write me an article about this to work well? It always comes up. Like I feel like the kind of easy test for it is, do I myself enjoy reading it? And I found that actually I couldn't get through it. I just tried to reread the draft and again and again, and it was just daunting for me. And then, if that's the case, if you can't read your own content, like how can you expect someone else to read it? So that's why we decided to kind of have this approach of just outsourcing part of the content generation process, but definitely not the kind of like the whole thing.
Yeah, it sounds like overall, most people are a fan of in-house. I know for us, we found some pretty great outsourced writers, but we made sure to find people who knew the topic and knew the industry, and that makes all the difference. And then, as Jeff said, like a detailed description and brief also, I noticed, makes a huge difference, because what I have in mind for what my blog might be, just giving someone a title might be completely different to how they interpret it. Wanted to go on.
There is one type of content though that we do outsource for, and we've outsourced for multiple times, and it's always expensive, and we're always happy about it. Technical writers. They're absolutely great. It's a specialized skill. It's very hard to kind of like if you think that engineers are going to write good documentation, you're in for a treat. So like we've worked with multiple technical writers. There's a lot of absolutely great ones, and if you have a product that does require some technical component, I would highly suggest outsourcing it to some extent.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think technical writing, like you said, is such a skill between engineering and also content writing. That's one worth getting out-house. For next, we kind of want to talk about, we talk about what companies do well, best practices, how to make it. But I think we've also seen some examples of content that maybe fall flat, and don't want to name any names or anything, but what are just some traps that we often see with this product-led content, or where it doesn't seem as maybe authentic or maybe is too selly? And then Daniel, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I think being overly salesy is probably the easiest way to mess this up. Not doing enough diligence on like the keywords that you'd like to build your article off of to find or your content off of towards the persona you're writing it for. I think the distribution of it and how you aim to get it into the eyes of the reader, like and we've made this mistake before early on, like not thinking through that very diligently. And if email is a big component of distribution, ensuring deliverability is there, I think far too many companies I think once you have your domain set up, you're in the clear, but the unfortunate reality is that's definitely not the case. Let me keep brainstorming and pass this one off.
I'll just highlight biggest mistakes we see is people believing that they can focus on a topic only at one stage of the buy cycle, and they don't need to have content at all stages, or for different types of learners. So post-publish troubleshooting, post-publish community content, help desk content being your main landing page, big headache as we talked about before. Also, no content for your existing customers on that topic. So one way is huge gaps throughout the buyer journey. The other one, it comes out of not having anyone in your organization that understands consultative selling or value-based selling. Small tech companies run into this all the time, where it's heavy feature software selly, feature functioning, and it's not about value. It's not about business issue addressing, or it's very much like no matter what you say, the answer is us, and it just reads really, really ugly. This happens a lot in affiliate marketing as well. So if you have your affiliates writing content to generate interest in your company, it's like, hey, I was painting my house, and then all of a sudden I realized that I wanted to send better outbound email. So no matter where you're at, it'll all come back to Autobound, right? Well, that comes off very, very badly, and it can be, paradoxically devastating for a business. I've seen it happen so many times with, I call them affiliate hawks. You got to watch out. So it's not just your content; it's the content people are writing about you. You got to manage and monitor that quality content too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as far as, make sure that your message is consistent kind of with the affiliation too. Like if you're being authentic in your own content, you want to make sure that anyone's writing about you is also being consistent. That was what I was going to mention, is similar to not having content at different points in the funnel, maybe having various messages. Like we've all seen this just accidentally happen where your marketing team might have a different slogan that they like to use in their sales team that the CS team likes to use. And the whole point of product-led content, right, is to make it more clear what your product does. So if everyone's saying something different, you can actually end up confusing the buyers. And so
I love that example. I'll just parrot one thing: your ratings and reviews. If you're getting watch your refers. So go into your Google Analytics or whatever, watch where those refers are coming from. If they're coming from sites other than search engines, right? Make sure where they're landing, that the content on the place that they were is the same as the place that they land. So commonly you'll see people come from a G2 or a Software Advice or Capterra, and then they'll land on a page and it's got conflicting information. If it's different, that's okay. Make sure there's a bridge between those two things. Don't just smack them in the face with something they didn't expect. That's worth the price of admission for today's webinar. That tip right there.
That's a great point as well. Making sure, like I said, just everywhere it's out, that it's consistent. Last thing I want to dive in is sort of misconceptions about using your product. We kind of touched on these a little bit, but I'm curious from all of you, was there any internal pushback around, putting your product front and center? We hear this a lot, like people are like, oh, what if my competitors see it? What if, people aren't interested in booking a demo because they could see their product so early on? So I'd be curious everyone's experience there.
Yeah, I can definitely talk a little bit about that. I feel like so like for kind of like the Navattic aspect, where what we have currently is we're really showing the full demo of our platform, and so you can see pretty much all of it and all. I tend to find, and that one is more, it's not just related to content. I think that one is more global. I think people overestimate, kind of like worry too much about competition, worry too much about people stealing ideas, stealing content, stealing product, etc. But I feel the real value when you're starting to actually put your product out there and being very transparent about it, showing everything, documenting everything, being very, very public about it. One of the value that is I think, understated, is that it lets you get a ton of feedback very, very quickly. People will, I remember this one time that I received a text like on the chat of, we have like an intercom type of like a button, and there's someone who just like texts us like angrily, just the angriest message possible, like, oh, it's not like kind of like, oh, you think makes no sense, your documentation is like makes no sense, I tried this call, blah blah, it didn't work. Well, that's great feedback. Like, I didn't know that didn't work, so like that is actually great, because then we can get on it and adjust it and kind of like keep on iterating. We found that actually even showing the product early on and getting feedback from it, or just watching, we have we use Cohere, which is a tool similar to Full Story, to actually just see actually the sessions of users. We've definitely seen that actually kind of like in the demo where they're clicking, kind of what they're seeing, like at what point do they stop, like what grabs their attention, what doesn't. It's actually weird. Like after you've seen a bunch of them, you start to like be able to tell the personality of someone based on the movements of their mouse. You can tell if someone is angry or not. But yeah, like this has been like just like being open overall has been like very, very powerful, but is a little bit scary, especially when your product is a bit like earlier stage than what your aspiration might be.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that completely. I wish we had made the leap years prior than we did. We were late because we were selling a high-priced product, and it took us a while to get down into a freemium offering. What I'd say is, if your competitors are desiring to copy your stuff, they're going to figure out a way in anyway. We found that out the hard way. We had competitors pose as agencies and steal IP and then go out and create a new company multiple times. So it's going to happen if it's going to happen. And, figure that out. What do you want to do if that happens? Plan for that risk. Don't do it by hiding your product. Don't do it by, restricting access to your most important features, because no good can come from that in the long term.
And I kind of like that in a cynical way, the idea of like, send your competitors a link to your product demo, like let them try to remake what you have while you go innovate on what's new and like paving your own path of the company vision, because they will find a way into your product. But I'd say my biggest piece of feedback here is you can relate to giving a sales demo in the same way, where the biggest mistakes there are selling what you do, not why you do it. So when building that, when showing your product early on, I think that if you're pitching your features, you're making mistakes. It should be, here's why we're, what's a good way of speaking, but like, here's what folks just like yourself love about doing things this way, or here's like the pain points that we're solving by unlocking your new productivity by doing X, Y, and Z. Because otherwise people are like, I don't care that you have like a on-off switch for that, or yeah. So yeah, my co-founder and I went back and forth a lot on that framework of how we're messaging the product. And an exercise I always try to put myself into is, whenever I write an email, any content, LinkedIn posts, product tours, I think if I was the most critical version of a person that's looking at this, like, why would I hate it? And that's always helped take us back home pretty well.
Yeah, I recommend if you're looking for data resources for this, Bob Apollo from Inflection Point, value selling is a value selling framework. There's a number of those to check out. You can try to weave it into your product offering. It's not necessarily just how to learn how to sell, but check that out.
So speaking, it might be a little bit like off topic, but I think it might be good mentioning. So yeah, I definitely like Natalie, Jeff, Daniel, you have like background in like growth, sales, marketing. I did not have a background in growth, sales, or marketing. So because of that, I had to like learn how to sell like learn how to market and that kind of thing. So I definitely made a lot of mistakes at the beginning. And I would say it's funny because the biggest mistake that I feel like I've done in the past, which I think I'm still doing sometime, is just not to listen enough. Like I think if you've ever kind of saw something, you know that like a good discovery is just like setting you up for success. That like if you got the correct information from like someone and you know exactly, hey, this is what they're looking for, this is their problem, like you can just go on in a demo and just hit all of those points one by one, and it makes like kind of this absolute perfect like this perfect sales notion. I feel like the same is also true in the marketing, and that's also something that we've learned. And I mean, definitely, like you've alluded to it, that simply actually like we've had the landing page not talking to anyone specific for way too long. That we did not have a persona for our landing page actually, and this is something like we're redoing at this point because we have different types of buyers. We can like a CPO can buy our product, a CMO can buy our product, and a chief revenue officer can buy our product. So those are some very, very different persona, and they will not care at all about the same type of content. So by us having sort of like one website that only shows one kind of presentation of the facts, I think is something that like we've lost a lot from. And doesn't need to be actually kind of like that you need to redo like a homepage for every single persona, but just making sure that there's the content out there that will talk to them, that will answer their questions, and really be as targeted as possible is this thing that I've learned and I'm still learning.
I love your point at the beginning about, this is a way to get information faster. Like you'd almost rather, if there's something wrong with your product or things that people aren't liking, you'd almost rather them tell them you earlier on. And yes, it's harder to hear, but rather get that feedback than just kind of assuming everything's fine. I think that's great content about, there's worries about putting it out there, but your competitors could see it if they want to. So might as well, like you said, get the learnings and focus on your product rather than worrying what other people as far as competitors are thinking.
And speaking of competitors, we'll definitely learn what you do. Like just as of today, I heard from 3 clients of ours that they got offered $600 an hour to actually like have an interview about our product. So like obviously like people are always going to like find ways to kind of like see your product and all. Yeah.
That's a new one. I haven't heard offering money to customers about their product, but clearly people will find a way. I wanted to open it up. I mean, this is our last question. If the audience had any questions around any of these topics or anything we didn't cover, or final words from panelists.
Yeah, if no questions again, what I would say is just to be real about your existing content inventory. Look at your competitive landscape to try to understand what everybody's doing and what would really truly differentiate you. Those are first steps for anyone assessing, and then start from the end. I mean, great stories have that aha moment. It's how does a person change after having experienced your product? And if you can't answer that question, you can't tell a good story anyway. So try to figure out what that moment is where that ideal customer changes, and then build around that. You build around that, then it's going to be a good story. If not, you're just, spouting off features.
Any other final thoughts? If not, we can give people a few minutes back in their day. Okay, I think we're all set. Thanks again for everyone for listening to our topic on product-led content. If you want to reach out, we're all on LinkedIn. Feel free to share your own examples of product-led content, or if you have additional follow-up questions about anything that was asked today. Okay, thanks again, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice week.